Welcome to another live stream. We're going to talk about gang stalking as usual. Just waiting for some people to show up here. I don't see anybody out there yet. Oh, wait, we got three people. Angels don't fall. Welcome. Steve the Pigeon. Awesome. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. I've been working like a dog. Yeah, it's kind of been paying off. Okay. Rizzo Rain. Oh, we've got six people out there. You know, the worst thing about gang stalking is the all-encompassing horrific menagerie that targeted individuals are thrown in. It's beyond belief. It's a complete reality flip. And for targets out there who are dealing with the full meal deal, it is literally a nightmare. Okay. And we're going to talk about that because all targeted individuals have that in common. Even if you're just dealing, with a couple aspects of gang stalking, of group harassment, you're still dealing with something that is beyond. Okay. You were dealing with hell on earth. Okay. When people experience workplace harassment, when they experience surveillance, directed conversations, people in their family become involved, people in their social circle, everywhere they go, they just can't seem to get away. And it can get to the point where a targeted individual is blackballed and, they're pushed into a place of financial destitution. They are pushed into a place where they're living in their vehicle, where they're living like a vagabond. It's literally a nightmare. Well, I'm going to get rid of the background noise. I don't know how productive that was. But anyway, let's see who else we got out there. Oh, Rebecca. Okay. Sadistic entertainment, Rebecca says. Well, I wouldn't disagree with that because they're getting something out of it. I've talked about that in a lot of videos. What exactly is that? Well, it just depends on who you're dealing with. Okay. But the thing to remember amongst all the theories and speculations concerning why people do this, and the thing to remember is no matter what it is, no matter, what kind of monster you're dealing with, whatever kind of pathological individual that has put their sights on you, and some of them are pretty damn dangerous. Okay, we've talked about that before. At the root, they are very discontent. And remember that they have passed up so many obvious, normal, positive, fun options that it can only mean one thing. Don't make it too complex when you get into that. You have to simplify things as a targeted individual. Doesn't matter what it is. Simplify it. Okay? Because when people engage you as gang stalkers, when people become involved, whatever it is, whether you're dealing with innuendos or directed conversation or workplace harassment or neighborhood harassment or whatever, they're passing up normal options. Happy people who are satisfied with their existence, they don't do that kind of stuff. Okay, they don't. They don't do those things, and there's a reason why they do them. Okay, and I've mentioned that before. There's a lot of people that they get so sick of being harassed. Their life is turned into a nightmare. These people seem to be getting away with it. They're experiencing all these different forms of deprivation. And some people, they come to different conclusions. What's the end game? Why are people doing this? What do they want? Why are they obsessed with me? And some of them believe that, well, they must be trying to turn me. Maybe they just want to recruit me. Maybe they just want me to succumb and give up and become like them. Well, it's not that easy. Okay, and I've talked about that before. In fact, I think Nicholas Bosserman was the individual that said that he tried to do it. There was another guy that I talked to out in California, and he was getting chased through the woods, and he finally just said, "The hell with it," And he turned around, and these people came up on him, and he's like, "What do you want me to do? You gonna set me up? I'm pretty good with computers. What do you want?" And they just laughed at him. They laughed at him and walked away. I'm assuming he was telling me the truth. But the problem is that you couldn't do it. It takes a certain psychopathy. It takes a certain, I don't know, psychological critiquing to be sadistic enough to do this, to be heartless enough, and to engage in this kind of thing when there's so many other things you could be doing. There's so many elements that come into this. And I've talked about that before, that, there's a lot of targets out there that they try to figure out, why are these people obsessed with me? Not only is it mind-boggling in the sense that it would take, a ridiculous amount of logistical coordination to pull some of these things off, which I've gone into the spiritual dimension for a lot of that. It's not always like that. I mean, it manifests in a lot of different ways. You obviously have things like MK Ultra. You have different programs. You have individuals that become obsessed with targets. But that's the point. You have to simplify it and see what's really underneath. And every time you get attacked as a targeted individual, you get to see into their hearts. You get to see into their minds. Okay. And it can get pretty intense depending on what you're dealing with. I've heard a lot of people who, they try to figure this stuff out. And, they will see all the things that everybody's talking about there online, whether it's the secret societies or, the people who claim that they're being hunted down by Satanists or other things to explain it. And it just, to them, it seems ridiculous. And so they'll focus on one thing, something that makes sense to them. Well, it's all got to be some type of technology that's controlling these people. It must be some type of program, some type of government, logistical, takedown in society where people are recruited. They're getting notifications on their phones, no matter where the target goes, whatever city they try to run to, like on John Wick, where all these people were getting notifications as he would walk. And of course, they were getting the amount of money that they would be paid if they were the ones to take him down. And a lot of targets will believe that. What the hell's going on? Why are all these people doing it? A lot of targets will come to the conclusion that there's a hit out on them. People are going to be paid, wanted, dead or alive. I mean, you can only speculate as to what you're dealing with. But I think it's all of it. It's not just technology. It's not just some supercomputer or some other things that people talk about. A lot of targets will deal with electronic harassment. And I've mentioned before that, when you look at the bigger picture, when you look at the gang-stalking horror machine, mechanized, methodological labyrinth of madness, you can't isolate it. You have to look at it as a complementary system, a machine, because that's what it is. When you try to separate it, even into just the secret societies. You're missing the bigger picture. When you try to isolate these things into simple terms, well, it's all just technology. Well, no, you're missing it. You're missing all of it because it's everything. And when targets are dealing with the gang stalking horror machine, when they are dealing with this mechanism of labyrinthian madness, of malevolence, well, it's going to take all of it. When targets go on the run, when they're new and they're being attacked, it's hot, it's heavy, it's aggressive, it's overt. They don't know what's happening. The speculation runs wild. The anxiety is over the top, and there doesn't seem to be any explanation. There's just too many options. But it's literally everything. And when people, I don't know, kind of laugh and joke about it's not witches, it's not warlocks, it's not the Freemasons, it's somebody in a damn room somewhere who's got some kind of thing hooked up to a satellite. Come on, man. Okay. Well, it might be. But for me, it's all of it. For me, I've seen everything. And over the decades that I've experienced gang stalking, I can honestly say with a clear conscience that all these things are involved. That people that become involved in your scenario, who begin to gang stalk you, are individuals who can be paid. They can be involved in government programs. They can be individuals who are influenced spiritually. They may, not be sacrificing animals like some, ridiculous example out in the graveyard somewhere as some type of Satanist, but they are in a place where they can be manipulated, where they have spiritual entities in their life. And when you look at the infiltration of the secret societies that go into the government, well, you can see all these things. Okay, you can. It's there. There's no getting out of it. It's a mechanism. Okay, and MK Ultra was the same way. When people criticize the targeted individual community, they're overlooking a lot of things. Okay, they're overlooking, all the things that we're dealing with now, and they're overlooking the reality of a lot of things that people have uncovered. Whistleblowers, the documents of MK Ultra, the things that Snowden was talking about, the communist agenda. Larry McDonald got shot down by a Soviet in an airliner trying to expose the deep state conspiracy. The secret societies exist. The 13 families, they exist. When you look into the evidence, you can see the hierarchy. The puppets are everywhere. And when targets are dealing with these things, it goes from the top down. And anyone who is involved in this world and who is not dedicated to the Lord Jesus Christ, well, you're out there to be manipulated. You're out to be part of this menagerie. Whether you're in some type of mind control program, or COINTELPRO, or some type of FBI, secret program, or organized stalking, cognitive warfare, multi-domain warfare, counterterrorism, enslavement through trauma-based mind control, government experiment, a terrorist screening database or surveillance, experiment, contract stalking that involves, testing on individuals to silence whistleblowers, or whether you're just being used as a vessel of wrath, an example, maybe to coerce members of a secret society to keep silent. There's a lot of possibilities out there. The CIA, the NSA, the FBI, the DHS, the DOD, NATO, the occult. You get into the chain of that, and that goes all the way up from novice all the way up to the mothers of darkness. Usually the women have most power in the witchcraft. You do have men who are involved in that. And then, of course, you got Freemasonry, the Illuminati, Rosicrucianism, the Committee of 300, the Council of 33, the royal families, and all this stuff. Really, it goes back to the Genesis 6 account. So you've got this whole thing intertwined. Astor, Bundy, Collin, DuPont, Freeman, Kennedy, Lee, Onassis, Rockefeller, Russell, Van Dyne, Merovingian, Sinclair, the Trilateral Commission, the military-industrial complex. All these things can be part of it. And when targeted individuals are dealing with the machine, when they are dealing with the menagerie of harassment, the reason that they can't get away, the reason that they can't leave the United States and find solace, or that they go out in the middle of the country and somehow people know, why they believe that even their thoughts are being monitored. Well, you're dealing with all of it. It is a machine. I'm going to go into the comments now and see what you guys are talking about. Okay. Angels Don't Fall says, like the witches that play dead in the middle of the desolate remote stretch of the road. So you have to stop and run them. Wow. Wow, man. I've seen some pretty wild stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of I had somebody pull up in the alley a couple nights ago. And it's every now and again you'll get dumpster divers and stuff like. You never know what the hell's going on. In fact, I put one of them on a video about a year and a half ago, where this guy just pulled up and just got out of his vehicle and stared at my cameras with his doors open. You don't know what the hell's this guy doing. Nobody knows who he is. But you'll deal with unorthodox techniques as a target. Somebody pulled out, and they're sitting there. When the guy came out with a flashlight, he's acting all erratic, and then he just goes back in the vehicle. I thought, well, I don't know. Who knows what the hell he's on? And I figured, well, he's not going to, he's going to go. There's cameras out there. I mean, really? And so he didn't leave. And I'm sitting there looking, and it's late. I want to go to bed. It's like 2 a.m. And I could have put it on the, I suppose I could put a stupid video up there. I don't want to be accused of being one of those individuals who puts a bunch of, videos up there trying to prove gang stalking is true, because, of course, you always get the disinformation agents. And then you get other people who accuse you of being crazy or whatever. But I've got a few videos. I just have never posted them, except that one that I talked about. But he wouldn't go. And so I'm thinking, man, I want to go to bed. And it's just creeping me out. It's right next to my house. And so I turned on the light, looked out the window, and he just spun gravel all over the house. Who does that? Was it a gang stalker? I don't know. Was it some nut on meth? Who knows? But he was really acting erratic, and but I don't know. The witches out in the middle of the road. That's interesting. You hear a lot of things, especially with all the unassimilated citizens. That's what I'm going to call them, coming in to our country, that they're setting up fake roadblocks and stuff, trying to get people to stop so they can carjack them. In fact, the other day, I had 2 teenagers pull up alongside me, and I didn't know what was going on. Hey, mister, beckoning me to roll down the window. And so I rolled it down a little bit, and the kid says, I'm sorry to bother you, sir, but I think your license plate's getting ready to fall off. Maybe you should pull over there and look at it. And I said, yeah. And I just kind of rolled up the window and took off. I knew that there was nothing wrong with my license plate. I thought maybe they were joking, and I told my friend about it. He usually calls me when I'm at work, just to BS with me a little bit. And he said, oh, no, man, those guys wanted to carjack you. They wanted you to stop and get out, and they were probably going to, who knows what they were going to do to you. They wanted your vehicle. But the people that are setting up these fake roadblocks are taking cones and other obstacles, and they're setting them out there, usually on a bridge or something where people really don't have anywhere to go. And, of course, it's always in the middle of the night. And it's creepy. There's videos out there about this stuff, and there's people hiding all around. And then of course you'll have people. They might have a fluorescent jacket, or like a construction jacket or something, and they'll put these cones out there. When people stop, they'll come and you know uh, basically attack them. There's a lot of weird things that happen. Never stop. And unless you want to be, some kind of hero or paramedic or something like that, I'm over that stuff, because a lot of things nowadays, especially, are just nothing more than a setup. Okay. The Englishman says, I can't figure out if my old lady and her kids are in on it at this point. I'm almost 100% sure she's in on it. Well, that's a good point. And like I said, you got to be careful how you process this information. Okay. Because if you take the spiritual application out of gang stalking, and you're dealing with, especially when you're dealing with kids or family members or people who are not obviously part of a government thing, because that's what happens. When you isolate this, when you take this into an imbalanced scenario, everybody becomes a CIA employee, or everybody's working for the government or the Freemasons or something. It doesn't work. Okay. Does that mean those people can't be involved? No. Does it mean that it's possible, or it's not possible, that the government has selected you for something and is literally putting disinformation out for your neighbors and us? I think that stuff happens. Absolutely, it does. I wouldn't even deny that. But when you're dealing with a scenario like the Englishman is talking about, it could be that, But what happens to individuals when you got the spiritual dimension involved, where they become manipulated? Okay, it's not like they're full out possessed, mindless automatons. Where people can be manipulated. I remember doing crazy stuff when I was a kid, and if when I think back on it, I was like, boy, if that person, was a victim of gang stalking, they would have thought for sure that I was a gang stalker. They would have thought that, because some of the stuff you do when you're a kid is just nuts. I remember doing, the craziest stuff, and it would just pop into my head, go do this, or, here, that'll be funny, or whatever. And you find yourself, doing vandalism, driving a neighbor crazy or whatever, or somebody in your family. And it's just like, it's nobody's paying you to do it. It's nobody from the CIA is contacting you. It's just, these things are popping into your mind and you're just giving into it. It's just, so rather than to look at it as always a conscious collusion or some type of, master plan scheme, sometimes people are just drawn into this stuff. And, there is a scheme, there is a menagerie, there is a plan and a collusion to deceive and destroy everybody. And, but, that comes into the kingdom of darkness, that goes into the realm of the spiritual dimension. But as far as their puppetry, some of them know more, some of them know less. Some of the people that I've dealt with, they had a lot of information and they knew what they were doing. So other people, I don't think they really knew what was going on. And sometimes they would just become absent-minded and not even realize what just happened. But at the very least, you've got the machine. You've got all these things together. Because like I said, when you start making everybody a Freemason or, some kind of employee for a secret program, it disintegrates. Now, some scenarios are more believable than others. And like I said, that does happen. Okay. Stuff like that absolutely does. When you look into MK Ultra, you've got institutions of people who were not even affiliated with the government being infiltrated by the government to do this stuff, whether it was, the treatment centers or, doctors or whatever. And a lot of the nurses, they thought, well, this is a new breakthrough type of treatment. They were indoctrinated, infiltrated, and, basically tricked into a lot of this stuff. They didn't know that they were helping the government conduct mind control, experiments against citizens, that they were experimenting illegally, doing all these weird things. And we only got so much of that information. We didn't even get a whole lot of it. Who knows exactly what they did? I'm afraid to even, think about what was going on that we didn't find, but it was out there. Let's see. Let's see what's going on. Okay, Mats and Miles, welcome to the live stream. What can they say to convince my ex-wife or husband to help them torment a target? I have had a friend who's been my friend for 40-some years, and he avoids them now. Threats? Interesting. That's a good point. I've heard that from a lot of targets. I've experienced it myself. And sometimes it can change, very rapidly. Okay, and it can go in and out. It's like targets who talk about their harassment, and they're like, I think maybe it's over, or it let up for a while. I'm doing okay now. I'm trying to regain my morale. It seemed like my targeting has slowed down a little. Good, to take advantage of it, enjoy. But it's the same with that type of involvement, or I guess you would say that type of excommunication strategy, that isolation strategy that targets deal with. Because one of the things that all targets talk about is all of a sudden, it seems like all their good friends and everything are just, it's like, I don't know what people have told them. I don't know what kind of disinformation campaign is out there, but everybody's avoiding me. Everybody is treating me different. It's like I've got some kind of disease now. It's like I've been blackballed in a matter of 24 hours. People that I've known for decades, individuals that I grew up with, people in my family. It's like, how in the hell do you accomplish something like I said, it can work out a lot of different ways. But people are very easily manipulated, and I've talked about that before. When when targets are awakened to this reality that was always around them. This mechanism was always there. Well, it's quite the eye opener. Okay, some people can't handle it. They la 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 la. They want to whistle through the graveyard. It's a computer. It's nothing else. It's well, it can be that. It can be a lot of things, but heaven's real. Hell is real. The devil is definitely real. God and Jesus are definitely real, and sometimes people just can't handle it. They're getting an overload, okay, and it's just too much. But a lot of times you'll see that type of inconsistency where you'll have targets that'll go on and they'll, gangstalking is real, and I believe in Jesus and all this stuff, but it's just, there's all that hoopla about, witchcraft and demons, and I don't buy it. Well, if you're a believer in the Bible, unless you don't believe the Bible, then you're going to have to look into those things. And I've talked about that, whether you're talking about Paul and Silas in Philippi, who cast the demon out of the prophetess, who had everybody in that area convinced that she was some type of, guru, or other examples like the demoniac, some guy that was possessed, by, a legion of unclean spirits, there's many examples. There's all kinds of things. Jesus was tempted in the desert by Lucifer. You get into the Genesis 6 account where the sons of God were mingling with the daughters of men. And then you get into Psalm 82 when the principalities and powers were judged and their immortality was revoked. And you get into geographical control. And then targets are always trying to figure out why. How does this work? How can it be possible that all these people could be involved in my scenario, and I run across the United States or leave the country and it's there? And I'm telling you right now, before the internet was up, this stuff was happening. Might not have been as bad. Might not have been as prolific, but we won't know. The only reason we're all getting together is because we've got the internet. Because when I started doing this, there was no one around. I didn't have anybody to talk to or relate with at all for a long time. But yeah, I would be careful how I would process this stuff, because rather than thinking that this is all just some type of human organized scheme, it can lead you down the rabbit hole. It can be a diversion, and you never want to attack the puppets. That's part of the strategy. The gang stalking horror machine. Targets are prepped. They're sensitized. They are conditioned. They are encircled. They're triangulated. They're methodically traumatized, conditioned, and sensitized. Okay. And it moves people into an emotional state of manipulation. They attack targets and they make them paranoid. Okay. I've talked about that before. Sensitization, a form of harassment involving subjective stimuli to create associations and actions, words and phrases, environmental stimuli for covert harassment or secret communication with the target. Right. And it's used in combination with different trauma attack techniques for unconsensual invasion into the target's mind and infiltration into their psyche, mixed with themes. And a lot of those create that type of environmental tyranny that is around the target, and it has a lot of reciprocity, and it causes the target to start processing information differently, and it moves them into a state of propositional tyranny. So when you're dealing with that emotional manipulation, when you're dealing with that type of tyranny, it can move the target not only into a place of isolation where they're having all kinds of different symptoms like anxiety, paranoia, all the way into the full-blown dysfunction and psychosis. The gaslighting is heavy, but it can move a target into the place where they're going to be provoked. They're going to react. There's a lot of people out there now that are using it as part of their introduction of their video. It's like, if you're thinking about killing yourself, if you're thinking about going out and shooting people, don't. It's not a solution. And the principalities and powers, the spiritual dimension, they know how to start war. They know how to get people to shed blood. They know how to create illusions. I've talked about that before. Just the unclean spirits getting into and I've been studying the Dead Sea Scroll calendar. You're looking at 3 different ages that have transpired. Around 6,000 years. And, according to these texts, according to some of those things, just the underlings, okay, the mixture, which is what the unclean spirit is. In the Hebrew, the unclean mixture is what you would refer to as a bastard spirit, or a spiritual entity that came out of the mixing of humans and angelic beings, a type of genetic tampering. Okay, those guys would be the foot soldiers, the familiar spirits, the unclean spirits. Those are the ones that are the least of them, and that's like dealing with a superhuman, ancient Nazi scientist. Let alone the other spiritual entities. We don't even know a lot about them. The Shadim, the Shadu, the principalities, the powers, the territorial spirits. Who the hell knows where, how long they've been around? We don't know those things. Okay. But, just taking a look at that and then looking at the manipulation we have, concerning individuals, concerning what they have accomplished, the obvious ties going all the way back to Egypt. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's not something to take lightly. And, targeted individuals are in that. They are in the gang stalking horror machine. I'm going to go back in the comments here. Nicholas Boserman, welcome. Glad to see you here. Rise to Power, welcome. Rise to Power says the Bible has many examples of gang stalking. I would agree with that. I would. Okay. Well, no perps yet, Nicholas. That's good. And that's one of the things that, I mean, when I was doing a live stream every night, it was just bait. Yeah. And speaking of the perps, like I talked about in the early part of the video here, um, the obsession. Some of you guys know people who are undoubtedly involved in your harassment. You have to have a very strict criteria, though. You can't be jumping to conclusions. You can't be, you know, using vague criteria to decide something like that. There are people who are obvious. Okay, Gorilla Boy, he's pretty obvious, and he's very, very obsessed with the targeted individual community. He'd be the best example. Now, I'm not attacking him, okay, or anything like that. I think he's got a lot of potential. Obviously very obsessed, probably very lonely individual. I mean, we're pretty much his friends, aren't we? In a weird way. Is that you guys ever feel like that sometimes that somehow you've just become like friends with these people? Not really though. Not to the point where you're friendly with them, but you interact with them so much, and every now and again, he'll be a nice guy. I don't, but anyway, it's just surreal. But the point the point is that people are obsessed. And when you look at his channel, he's got, I don't even know how many targeted individuals that he's keeping track of and sending notifications. And, some of the stuff that when the live stream went down, you guys don't understand YouTube technology. I knew what was going on. I was just like, hey, man, I'm backing off. I know I've got other things to do. When you see somebody like that who's taking time out of their, I mean, I don't have time to play games like that. In my spare time, I've got stuff to do. I've got things that I'm neglecting to do because I've got so many things on my plate. It seems like one thing after another. I get the flu, I get COVID, I get in a vehicle accident, I've got to get kidney stones, taken out of me. I've got this, I've got that, and then the other things that are happening. Somebody goes up on my roof and cuts the internet cable. I've got vandalism to deal with. I've got the other thing. I've got a vehicle. I don't have time. I've got to study. I got to make sermons. I got to make videos for you guys. And not only that, I've got a little cat to take care of, and I've got to work out. There's just so many things to juggle. And when you see the level of obsession that people have that have forfeited normal options to involve themselves in your life, if they're not getting paid to do it, if it's not something that's monetarily inspired, it's horrifying. It is. And I would consider someone like that very, very dangerous. Moving back into the comments here. Okay. Matt and Miles, I met someone last week who said she was a person of interest, but she talked about followers and how her phone is hacked, and she was familiar with everything I brought up, although I was vague. Okay, well, I don't, like I've said before, you got to be careful, and really you got to get to the point where you just don't care, because as a targeted individual, there's really no, I mean, you can go back to Kansas, but you're already home. But the targets are all dealing with the same thing. We talked about that in live streams. How is it possible that everybody's dealing with all these things simultaneously? Because there's a mechanism. There's a theme-based machine that you are dealing with. And the logistics in this thing go beyond space-time. I've talked about that. A lot of people will disagree. But how else does it work for targets who are dealing with the full meal deal, who are dealing with higher forms of harassment? And it seems like people are reading their mind. Wherever they go, there's no getting away. It seems like, their apartments are pre-wired. They run from one neighborhood to another, one city from another. And it's just, there's no getting out of it. Well, there's a way that this stuff works. And like I said, especially when you get into Deuteronomy and start looking at why Paul was chasing Christians, is he thought that these people, these Christians, were trying to lead people into worshiping another god, right? What was some of the other things that was in that criteria for people to attack individuals? Well, sometimes the things that false prophets would say, God would allow those things to come to pass, to test them, to see whether they love God. And of course, in our day and age, you could reckon that to a strong delusion. I've talked to people before. One guy called it divine manipulation. All right. And you see how the secret societies, you see how people in witchcraft, you see how individuals who are involved in different, occults or cults can be manipulated, can be deceived. And it doesn't seem like there's any other explanation. But that's the stimuli that is used. That's the stimuli. And, when it comes to this menagerie that targets are dealing with, there's all kinds of different things involved that we're all dealing with. So I'd be careful before jumping to conclusions, because I've had that happen to me before. How do you know what I'm dealing with, Dr. De facto? Well, because I know what all targets are dealing with. Okay. They're dealing with covert poisoning. They're dealing with food tampering. They're dealing with being blackballed. Okay. They're dealing with all these different themes, all these little forms of harassment. They're getting accused. They're dealing with all kinds of labeling after the disinformation kicks in. They're dealing with fear, paranoia, confusion, depression. They have trauma-based associations, flashbacks. They're anticipating the next attack. They're extremely paranoid. They're dealing with noise campaigns, role-playing, V2K, demonic attack. Little silent methodologies that get anybody wondering if they're losing it. People are looking at them funny, whispering. There's all kinds of different techniques involved in this. The noise campaigns are popular. The directed conversations are something that really scares targets, and that can move them into those different stages of paranoia that I've talked about before, where targets move into an extreme state of hypervigilance. Okay. And, the conditioning sets them up for that. I mean, people are prepped, and eventually they're isolated. Let's go back into the comments. Okay. Okay. Nicholas Boserman says, I don't hate Nerve, but I don't understand his obsession. Right. Well, like I said, that the whole thing is just frightening, because if people aren't being paid to do this, then it is some type of psychological thing. And it's just like any kind of, like when a girl deals with a stalker, she's, just living her life or whatever. And she sees something, moving around outside in the yard, and she thinks it's a cat or something. And there's this dude watching her. It's just, it's creepy. When people are obsessed, it's, something's wrong. Okay. If there's no money involved, there's some type of deep psychological problem. And it's horrifying. Like I said, I think it's definitely not something. If Nerve Gorilla is so obsessed now, he's, talking about pouring his wrath out on the targeted community, and all these, God help us if something goes wrong in his life. I've never done anything to him, right? As far as I know, right? Something is going on. And like I said, in many videos that, especially that profiling video for the perps, not just him, but a lot of people who become involved in this stuff, it's, it's something that you got to take serious. Okay, when targets start getting harassment, you have a tendency to think that people are like you. Oh, it's just some kind of game, and it's gonna go away. Okay, these people are gonna get their pound of flesh. They're gonna, okay, you got me. You got me. You freaked me out. You had me. You really had me wondering there. No, they're serious, man. They are now, and a lot of targets they will escape, or they will dodge the doom hammer of death of gang stalking, gaslighting and madness, and prevent themselves from losing their mind or committing suicide or something. And at that point, the harassment might let up. And then, of course, the gaslighting begins in a different way. Oh, we're just, trying to smooth out your character defects, or, get you, away from the booze or whatever. All right. They're winking and, oh, yeah, it's a game. But it's not. The obsession is serious. It should be taken seriously. And looking at the things that could happen, very reckless. Targeted individuals are subjected to a scenario that who knows what the hell is going to happen. Okay, like I said earlier, a lot of people are starting out their programs by saying, if you're thinking about committing suicide or hurting someone else, don't. You're playing into the strategy. Very reckless. Even a complacency that is created by gang stalking could cause a vehicle accident or something else. A lot of the noise campaigns and other techniques that targets are dealing with, who knows what's going to happen. If they're smokers or something, they could fall asleep with a cigarette. Who knows? Burn down an apartment complex. A lot of targets deal with that noise campaign stuff, and I know a lot of targets that smoke cigarettes. In fact, it's been, let me see, I quit in 2021, so it's been quite a while now. Since I quit smoking cigarettes. But that's happened to me before. I would be up for so long, getting harassed, getting stalked, and I'd wake myself up with a cigarette burning my finger. I'm just glad nothing else happened. Simple things can happen. It's dangerous, reckless, let alone the fact that targets are provoked. The abrasiveness that goes on in this whole thing. And a lot of targets are tempted to do something. And, really, when I deal with that, I would say, yes, if you're thinking about hurting yourself or other people, don't do it. But you have to know how that happens. You have to know how you get moved into the place where you're considering it. It's part of the gang stalking menagerie. It's part of the gang stalking horror machine that increases that sense of injustice and provokes people into a solution-based mindset that they have to solve this, that it's a type of game, that the only way they're going to escape is to go out and into a blaze of glory. It's never going to end. I'm not going to go crazy. I'm not going to let these people do this to me. I'm just going to end it right now. Well, are you sure? Are you sure about that? Better think twice. And I've talked about that too. It's one thing to be a free moral agent of society and deal with gang stalking. It's another thing to be in a mental institution or a prison or a jail cell. You don't want that. Okay. You don't want to be on paper as crazy. It makes it worse. Then they can get away with all the more. Yeah. Well, let's go back in the comments here. Okay. Angels Don't Fall says never give up. It's not an option. Giving up is letting them win. Don't let them win. Yeah, absolutely. And, there's a lot of targets that will say, oh, I'm beyond that. There's no way I can win. It's not about giving up. Well, I'm going to tell you this right now. When you don't give into their tactics, they hate that. They do. It really pisses them off. If you want to frustrate the perps, if you want to frustrate these individuals who obviously need this. Like I've illustrated earlier in the video, there's so many other options for these people to be engaging in. I mean, you got to want it to forfeit, fun, productive, healthy options to put your God-given time and resources in. You got to want it. Oh, they do. Don't ever forget that, guys. And I've thought of that many times. It's like that little voice will creep into my mind, and it's never going to stop. This is all this, and you become pessimistic, you become fatalistic, but that's part of it. Okay. And then maybe I should just give in. Well, that's what they want. Okay, they're going to get so much happiness and satisfaction out of that. You've got to deny them. You've got to. It is your duty. Absolutely, to yourself and to every other targeted individual out there. You want to stop what's happening. You forget about writing your governor or wearing a sign or something. Just pretend like you don't even see this stuff. Drives them nuts. Take it from me. I know what I'm talking about. Okay. Yeah, angels don't fall. So that's my main motto to be quoted. Nicholas Boserman, my stalking is at a minimum now, but I still get the honks here and there. They drive by in clusters of cars and honk. Yeah, I've seen that. They like stuff like that. And I've talked about the crescendo effect as well. A lot of targets will deal with that, and it will lead them into a place of propositional tyranny and come to the conclusion that the the firemen and the first responders are after them and so on. It's the ambulance gang stalkers. Well, no, that's not what's going on. But a menagerie. I've seen that. I've even seen perps who, in my opinion, were demonically influenced or even possessed, where that whole thing would light off, strangers, and then they would start joking around. Dogs would be barking. Kids would just go nuts all of a sudden. Everything would come to a crescendo. It's like one of those Catholic exorcist movies where all of a sudden everything just goes nuts. And, birds are flying into the windows and all that stuff. I've seen stuff like that. And in my opinion, that stuff can be demonic. A crescendo effect. And then targets are like, oh, look, the the ambulance people are after me. Well, no, they're not. But it sure as hell seems like it. Okay. Well, Dublin Fitzpatrick has a question, but I must not be seeing it. Unless you wanted to know how many Christians were out there. I did see that one. No, you must be talking about something else. Steve the Pigeon says, my apartment is awful. I'm surrounded by perp neighbors doing noise campaigns. Yeah, the hostile environment, the environmental tyranny that is created around targets has a lot of reciprocity, and noise campaigns are like that. Not only are they invading your mind, the space invasion, the invasion of the psyche, they are constantly reminding you of that. No peace, no rest. Apartments are really bad for that. I mean, it just gives so many opportunities. I've never seen it go good, man. I've never seen a targeted individual who was getting a lot of harassment, very aggressive, intense harassment, be able to play that game. I mean, I've done things like that, and it was tough. It was very difficult. You get the directed conversations, people yelling them through the walls at targets. Loud music, high decibel conversations. Different areas of invasion in the apartment complex. It feels like people are following you around. You move from one room to the other. It's like they can see through the walls. I mean, it's just crazy. Repetitive things going on, noises, people banging on the walls, different types of behavior. It's a type of geographical nightmare. Okay. Well, Dublin's talking about the election. Yeah, that's got everybody wondering what's happening. To me, I'm thinking that there's going to be something around that that's going to manipulate people and provoke them into action. It's similar to targeted individuals because people are being set up for that. A lot of the things, like false flags and things I'm not going to mention because I don't want this to be erased, are being brought up on different, I don't know, alternate news outlets. Of course, we had the declaration on Easter, and you guys all know what that was with the LGBTQ. But that day has been used for quite a while as a celebration for that community. But the fact that it was announced, I mean, but I think the next year we're going to have Easter in March is like what, I don't know, 20 years away or something like that. But that's not the point. But the other option is that the year after the election, things are really going to, get crazy. But I don't know. We're going to have to see on that one. It's all speculation. Steve the Pigeon says one girl would do deliberate karaoke and would sing, "I think we're alone now." After being isolated, I would do this. Hilarious. I've seen that one before. I've had people, walk by me singing that and look at me and, but, but targets. And then what's the other one? Oh gosh, what's that song? It was on Cat's Eye with Stephen King. Oh God, I can't remember. You guys know which one I'm talking about. I'll be watching you or whatever it is. There's a lot of little themes. There's a lot of little games out there. And, the whole idea of using something like that, which is probably less popular unless, you're going through one of those, I don't know, grocery stores that are pumping in the retro music or whatever, is that it's a type of environmental thing where you're going to read into it. It's just a way to remind you, trigger you. Okay. The Art of Glory says, I had one tell me it's in your blood and it's been going on before you were born. Well, I've heard a lot of that too. Truthfully, there is a lot of things involved in the puppetry and involved in the hierarchy that goes back to Egypt and back to the Genesis 6 account that has different things going on. Even when you get into witchcraft and the occult, you get those things where people have lineages and things that are going on in their family lines and stuff like that. Definitely, those are familiar spirits and stuff like that. I do believe that's the right terminology for that. But is that why? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. But I think that everybody is on the target list of the kingdom of darkness. Just because someone's not a targeted individual or being gang stalked doesn't mean that they're not on the menu. They are, but they have to create that menagerie. And I've talked about the fact that targeted individuals are a very small minority of the population. Okay, they've got to select people for this. They can't just do it to everybody. It wouldn't work. And there's a lot of reasons. And you got to be careful, how you look at that. I would, definitely, no matter who you are, no matter if you're a targeted individual or not, you have to, you have to see the reality of the impending judgment. Right now, according to the Dead Sea Scroll calendar, which I've been looking into, and interestingly enough, even when you get into the crucifixion, which we just had Easter, when Christ was rebuking the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and calling them, basically the children of the devil, and so on and so forth. There's really more to that than just the fact that they wanted to use the law to murder Christ. Because when you get into the Dead Sea Scroll calendar, there was a break off from the traditions and the prophecies that were given to the Jews. They actually knew that one day there was going to be a virgin that gave birth to someone that was going to be the deliverer, or the Melchizedek prophecy 11Q13 in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, they knew that, but they had been lied to, and that had been obfuscated and hidden by the Pharisees and these other groups. And they were actually at war, to the point where the Romans were called into the scenario. The Essenes, which John the Baptist was one of them, he went down to, well, actually, I don't know if he did, but the Essenes went down to Egypt to get away from this whole thing. That's when you get into what was going on as far as Jesus being, brought before Pontius Pilate. Okay, because if they got to the point where they were fighting, and the priests had basically gone nuts. Okay, and so that's why the Romans had to step in, because they were just killing people for crazy reasons. Okay, it had nothing to do with their system of justice anymore. And when it came to the crucifixion of Christ, if anybody, in other words, if they went out and made war and killed somebody without the permission of the Roman government, they would be subject to capital punishment. But all that goes into the fact that these people lied and covered up all those prophecies about Jesus coming. It's like when you get into John 6, you don't know who I am because you were not taught of God and of the prophets. That's the John 6:45. All right. And a lot of people have been debating that. Right? Does this have to do with God just choosing some people and not choosing others? Well, no, Jesus was telling them who he was, not to mention that the prophecies of Daniel. Okay. But getting into what I'm saying is, when you get into the Dead Sea Scrolls, you're finding a lot of this stuff out. We're in the last 50 years of that age before the 1,000 years, which is the age of grace, which actually started on Pentecost. I mean, all these things are lining up. But even if you're not a targeted individual, you have to accept the reality that you need to think about that. You need to either make a choice, or you're gonna suffer the consequences. And like I've mentioned before, if you're a targeted individual and you're ignoring the spiritual application of this, you're missing everything. You're missing the benefit of Gangstalking, because it can be a benefit. Get back into this. Okay. Mm-hmm. Nicholas Bosman says, I wonder how many people think someone is mentally ill, but they're actually a target. Well, I think a lot of that happens. And I've talked about the fact that, there's people who they would say, I think there's, millions or, tens of millions of people that are being targeted. Well, they are. But a lot of those people are being targeted in such a covert way that they don't consider themselves targeted individuals. They're not being gang stalked, however you want to describe that. Where if you're in this forum and you consider yourself a targeted individual, it's because it's obviously happening to you. You're not, dealing with invisible stimuli, or just invisible stimuli and very super covert techniques to get you to believe, without any provocation, that you're just mentally ill. There's a lot of people out there who believe they're mentally ill, who are literally being targeted, but not like you. They're just being targeted in a way that's very covert. Okay, it's like targets that deal with electronic harassment, or V2K or something like that. But then they've got people doing directed conversations on them and breaking in their house and doing all this other stuff. Well, I'm a victim of gang stalking. But other people are dealing with it in a way that's more covert. And they just start thinking they're nuts, right? They start believing they're crazy. which is, really where this goes. And a lot of, as far as the end game, violence, suicide, and insanity, right? Targets are prepped, they're encircled, they are triangulated, they're methodically traumatized, conditioned, and sensitized, emotionally manipulated. Environmental tyranny is created around them to create propositional tyranny and reprogram them. They are moved into isolation. They become dysfunctional with anxiety, paranoia, and other forms of dysfunction. They experience accusation, gaslighting. All these little games are played with them. They become discredited. They get a false diagnosis. They're provoked. They end up in prison. Whatever. Violence, suicide, insanity. It's gaslighting. And other people believe it. Small minority of the population, a menagerie, a gang stalking horror machine. Matson Miles says you got to be aware of your surroundings and know where reality lies at all times. Yeah, and it was always there. That's the hardest thing about this. Because targets feel like they're in a different dimension. They feel like they've been thrown into an alternate reality. No, you're just really seeing where you are. You're just waking up. You're like Neo in the Matrix. Okay. Hmm. Okay, well, looks like you guys have a pretty good dialogue going out there. Nicholas Bosserman says, if I see hand signals, I start doing baseball signs. And then the other targeted individuals are around you. They think you're one of the stalkers. Hilarious. Anybody have a question or a burning desire to get into this a little bit further? It's getting late, and unfortunately, I have to get up and go to work. I am a night owl, but I pay the price for that. Okay. Nicholas Bosman says, and they get put on meds that mess them up. Yeah, well, that's prolific, which is the funniest part about some of the critics of the target individual community who are criticizing us with really no, I don't know, professional ability to diagnose anybody with any of the psychological conditions that they're accused of having, let alone saying that the course of medication should be instituted on people. Okay, unless you're a doctor, you shouldn't be telling people that they're crazy and they need medication. That might not be what they need, even if they are experiencing mental illness. Contradictive. Okay. Well, I'm looking through the comments a little here. Well, Nicholas Bosman has something good here. I looked through the comments that I missed. I've had them break into my room and wake me up standing over me and then walk out of my room. Scary stuff. Yeah, I've seen that. I've had that happen to me. That'll really get your attention. There's no getting out of that. It's one thing to get some directed conversations. It's one thing to, have some workplace harassment. It's another thing to have somebody break into your house and do something to you while you're asleep, really get your attention. They know that. And that's part of the strategy. That's what they do. That's how they get to targets. I've talked about that before. You got, different levels of paranoia. And they'll do that. They'll use the directed conversations. They'll use all their little techniques, surveillance. But if that doesn't work, they'll get aggressive. Never underestimate these people. Like I said, they're horrifying. Why would someone forfeit normal options to engage in this type of activity? They only have one life to live. And of course, they're always reminding you of that. We're going to make your life hell. But why? Why would they waste their time doing something like that? It doesn't make any sense. Unless they're crazy and psychotic. And of course, the funny thing is they're accusing you of being crazy. Okay. Well, I'm going to check the comments again. What happened to them? Oh my gosh, they disappeared. Yeah. Hey, Angel Stone Fall says, in order to take the limelight off their crazy illness and redirect the spotlight on you. Well, yeah, that is part of it. That is part of it, because if you're crazier than them, they don't have to feel bad about the crazy stuff that they've got in their closet. And I've mentioned that before, guys. When you're dealing with somebody who's accusing you, doesn't matter whether you're a targeted individual or not, and obsessed like that, just imagine the skeletons they've got in their closet. I know we've all got skeletons in our closet, but he who blows their horn the loudest has the most to hide. And when people are victimizing someone else, well, it's a type of projection to redirect, to gain a type of identity that is supposedly, in the mind of the deluded individuals involved in this, the opposite of whatever it is that they're running from. And they are running from something. Don't give it to them, guys, because when you ignore this stuff, when you play it cool, when you don't give in to their techniques, they really hate that. They do. They hate it. They don't like it. Simplify your life. And as I mentioned before, if you're thinking about hurting yourself or someone else, don't do it. Pray, ask God to help you. It's not worth it. You're just playing into their strategy. And you don't have to solve these things. That's the good news. They're going to try to get you to control a situation that is out of your control. You can't play into that. You never want to play into their strategy. You want to avoid the complexity and derailment that they are trying to throw you into using non-reactive behavior involving a display of obliviousness, a lack of emotional disposition that drives the attackers crazy, or crazier than they already are. Of course, they are crazy. You don't want to form any type of emotional paradigm or proposition. You don't need revenge. You don't need anything. The only thing you need is to not be manipulated, because gangstalking is manipulation. Gangstalking horror machine. God bless, guys. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.